All right, everybody, welcome to the Weekly Exchange by KOALA, where we talk about everything timeshare. This is for timeshare owners that just bought their timeshare owner yesterday and walked out of that sales presentation and they're thinking, what am I doing? And this is for the timeshare owner that has owned their timeshare for 20 years and they want a new alternative, ways to rent their timeshare that they have never heard about. So we have tips for you today. We have lots of stuff that we're going to dive into. We're going to go from a bird's eye view and look at, hey, what are some of the big picture ideas, some big picture tips on how to rent your timeshare. And I've got Mike here with me, CEO of KOALA, timeshare extraordinaire, timeshare owner himself.
Timeshare
Yes,
extraordinary.
timeshare extraordinaire. That's what we're calling you, Mike. And he's
All
come
right.
on the weekly exchange today to kind of give us an in-depth look on some of these topics because I do consider him an expert. So let's jump into the presentation here. Again, this is the weekly exchange. We're going to go through these 4 tips with you. We've got our friendly koala mascot Miles here to help us out as well. And like I said, Mike's just going to dive into these topics a little bit more in depth so that you can get a better understanding of the best way to leverage your timeshare. So, tip number one, Mike, if you want to start elaborating on this a little bit, have a goal. What do we mean by that exactly?
Understand very clearly what it is that you're trying to get out of your timeshare rentals, right? Some people are really looking for some financial relief. That financial relief is going to help them cover their maintenance fees. Maybe they purchased their timeshare points or weeks a long time ago, or maybe they've upgraded a few times and now they're winding down travel. And so those folks are in a situation where the money is needed to kind of offset their costs, right? Other people are looking at this saying, no, 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 I own a prime piece of inventory that I purchased, and that offers me either premium access or early access to some of that inventory, or I have a fixed week, and I know that that's going to yield me X over my maintenance fees, and so like I want to make sure that that's what I'm looking at. And so
Right.
understanding those things are going to help you position yourself the best for the market. Both of those things cannot always be true at the same time, which means you can't assume that everyone else is going to do it for you. You're going to have bad inventory, and at the same time, you're going to extract the most amount of money from the market. And unfortunately, call a spade a spade. When people go on sales presentations, that's sometimes the idea of what this is. It's like your points are gold, and that
Right.
whatever you do at any time is going to yield these insane results, and that's just not the case. Like anything else, right?
Right.
Another thing we talk about is specifically DIY, which is do it yourself, or full service. There are several platforms out there. There are services that are available. Services be very careful with, obviously, because a lot of people claim to be a service when in reality they're a bit of a rental scam,
Mm.
particularly when you look into what are called RCI bonus weeks. Please be careful with that stuff. Whenever you're looking at platforms that have really, really huge upfront fees that are not necessarily driven towards results, be very cautious of that. Yes, we have VIP memberships, but that is to augment different or enhance different features and benefits. You can always list for free if you like, and with that, it would be no upfront fees, and you would just pay a commission if it gets booked, and you pay nothing if it doesn't. You could delist, you could move things around, etc. Or you could do like something where there's a full service, where again those people are going to be very hands on with everything, but again they're going to take a much larger piece of the pie. So you just want to be aware of what those options are. More importantly, you want to be aware of where you sit in that interest, because there could be people that think they want to do it themselves but don't have the experience, or think they want to do it themselves but
Right.
don't really have the time to focus and make sure that they're speaking to guests, that they're pricing this thing and checking the markets and all of that stuff. So, again, just know where you are on that spectrum, and make your decisions wisely, because I've seen too many people assume they want to do everything themselves, and they go for the most amount of money, they have the least desirable inventory, and it always ends up in the worst situation. And so don't do that.
Got to be realistic. And yeah, as always, guys, it's no pressure, but you can try Koala. There's going to be a link in the description. If you want to create a listing for free and just try it out, you can use the different tools we have there and give it a shot.
Case in point, obviously, as Koala, we always want you to use Koala first, but we also would rather you use any of our competitors or any other platforms that are legitimate over getting scammed, right? So, like, if you
Yes.
don't know, you could always reach out to us. If there is a preferred platform, or if there's someone that's soliciting you, you could ask our team. We have an email, and we will respond in kind, giving you unbiased advice. Again, we would love for you to be a Koala customer. We would absolutely hate for you to be scammed. We started this company so that we can help timeshare owners. And if that means that your best option is to go with a service that you know someone that knows someone and they're great, then fine. Well, we believe we could do a better job, but that's not the point. The point is that whatever you're comfortable with, make sure you're doing business with people that you trust and you've done some research with. Okay.
There's enough scams out there. We've obviously heard a lot of stories of people getting scammed. Whether obviously the timeshare exit industry, the rental industry. There's a lot of stuff going out there. So be careful.
Yeah.
And we're like Mike said, we're here to talk and here to give you advice for absolutely free and no pressure. So all right, tip number 2, we're gonna talk about inventory. So expand on that a little bit for us, Mike.
Inventory is obviously critical because if you don't have something people want, it's a very low likelihood that you're going to get it booked. It's that simple. Now, the way timeshare programs typically work is that most people, depending on maybe a status tier that they own within, or a resort that they own at, or a week that they own, will have access to certain inventory in advance or just in its totality if it's a fixed week. And so, knowing what that inventory is and how to best acquire it is going to really help you down the line, right?
Right.
Of course, there's always a way to, I won't say always, but there's some times where just random stuff will appear. I've seen ski stuff appear last minute. Maybe someone canceled, and so of course you can always play that game. But generally speaking, if you want to secure really good inventory, you have to typically grab that in the system well in advance. And generally speaking, even if you own at that resort, that can often be the case, right? Like you have a certain amount of time to before maybe everyone else that you have to reserve that inventory. So, for example, if you own a home week in a certain resort with Hilton Grand Vacations, you would have a 9 to 12 month window to grab that week that you own. That's specific to the unit type that you own and the season that you own in. You would have 3 months before the rest of the Hilton Grand Vacation owners to actually grab that inventory. I believe HGV Max, there's some different rules and regulations there, but generally speaking, the the home week, that's how it works. Okay. And then going back to like not just knowing what you have access to, but knowing what is actually desirable to everyone else, right? I see this all the time that people have these like kind of biases towards like their own resorts or their own times of year, or like, oh, I love going during this time because it has the most beautiful this or the best this. Like nobody cares. Like they really want to travel when there are peak seasons. Again, think about like summer weeks in something like Hilton Head, as I gave an example. You have a really condensed, high demand, low supply system. You have ski weeks in places like Breckenridge or Park City. Those are obviously going to be very, very powerful. And so just thinking like that in the mind of the traveler is going to give you very, very strong results if you have something that has, again, a market with very high demand, very low supply. Highlighting desirable features. So it depends on what platform you're going to be listing on, because if you're listing on KOALA, as you can see, there's a little bit of a note. We do all this for you. You just have to put in, the week you want to list and a price. And we have already populated all that resort data for almost every resort in the ecosystem. We're still adding day by day, but generally speaking, if you own, one of the branded properties, we typically have it in the database already. So, but if you're going on one of these more bespoke platforms or something that's not specialized or built for timeshare, you're gonna have to do all that yourself, right? So, like that means photos, descriptions, all of that stuff. Just be very clear about what those are. Highlight the best features of those things. Look, there's a lot of resources like ChatGPT that you can use to write some of this stuff, but generally speaking, if you have experience at that resort, and this is actually where speaking from the heart can matter, which is that like, what is your experience and what are your takeaways from this resort? What do you love about it? Things like that. That's where that actually can come into play.
Makes sense. And yeah, that is something you guys can go watch on the last episode. Mike actually goes through KOALA and shows how plugging in your resort name will pull up all the information, something KOALA does for you. And Mike, how can people plan ahead for this? Like, obviously, we don't want to be booking this vacation 2 weeks out. How can how can they get into the mindset of planning ahead, or what are some kind of dates that they should think about? I think you mentioned a little bit about this, but just talk about that so that people can get ahead of this.
One of the reasons that most people fail with timeshare rentals is because the intent is so diametrically opposed with what people need to actually do to be successful. And what I mean by that is that generally speaking, people come to the end of the year, they haven't used their weeks or points. They're, staring at some sort of wastage and they've about to pay another maintenance fee and they don't know what to do. That is not a situation you want to be in.
Right.
We do have, of course, programs where we can help you book a little bit more last minute and do some like we do a concierge service, but again, your payouts may not be exactly what you want them to be, and you have to kind of take that into account. So
Right.
don't be in a situation where if you think you're not going to use all your points one year, just push them till the end of the year or until they're about to expire, and then try to figure out what you can do from that point, because I can promise you it's not going to end well. don't get me wrong, people get lucky. But I see this all the time where people are desperately posting on Facebook, "Hey, I have these points are expiring in 60 days. Help me out! Like, who wants to rent?" Like, that's just not a good place to be. You really want to maximize this and get ahead of that, right? I always tell people that, look, you're better off renting something and then, pulling from points from the following year. Most programs you can borrow points. So, like, if you're utilizing your current year's ownership or your following year's ownership as a rental vehicle, you can always pull points in and borrow them as needed. So, again, it's like you're usually ahead of the ownership, not behind. It's generally speaking a great way to manage this. And again, plan ahead by booking inventory that other travelers are going to really want. And I don't just mean like necessarily random stuff that you think people might want, but just again, look at where there's that concentration of demand and potentially low supply. Obviously, it's a little harder to gauge, but spring break, people want to go away where it's warm. The winter, if people are traveling from cold areas and they want to go down to more tropic areas, that's going to be massive. So just think like that, right? Where do people want to go? When do they want to go? When are kids out of school? When can people travel, etc.? And again, it doesn't mean that if you have a week that's a little more shoulder season that it won't rent, but as we get into the next thing, you got to be conscious about what the pricing is in that scenario.
Yeah, I think one thing you said there was really important. If you're leaving things to the last minute, you might not get the same payout as if you planned ahead. It's just like if you were to be renting out an Airbnb or renting out your home or whatever. If you leave something too long, chances are you're not going to be able to play the market as much and get the best inventory and maximize your rental. So obviously important to plan ahead and just be proactive with this to get that return.
Tip number 3, pricing strategy. Pricing is the great equalizer. So as Ryan just said, like if you are in a situation where you kind of left it to the last minute and you're like, oh, here's a weekend that's a little bit of a shoulder season. So I use Hilton as an example. So it's not peak, but it's October, right? There's a lot of people that like to go after the whole summer rush, and it's still
Mhm.
nice, but you're kind of away from the crowds. That's fine. That is a strategy. But again, you got to be cognizant of what the pricing is, because at that point, all of the hotels become available as well. Different Airbnbs, different resorts, all of those things. Now you have all of this competition that's leveling the playing field. That's the stuff that you didn't have to compete with before because everything was sold out, or most things were sold out, or occupancy was at 95, 98%. Now it's at 50%. Got a lot more competition. You got to be aware of that.
Which comes with researching market rates and knowing when those shoulder seasons are. I mean, for me, I'm someone that likes to travel in shoulder season because I hate crowds. Usually that does come with a discount, which I also like. So that's something for you to consider, obviously, as a renter. How can people do a little bit more research to understand the kind of this playing field that they're playing on, depending on when they're renting their timeshare?
Yeah, well, again, I think it comes down to knowing if where you're listing, what area you're listing in, and you could deduce pretty quickly what is their peak seasons and what is their off peak seasons. It's not rocket science. With that said, there's a way to get more granular, and that is to actually research market rates and find the exact same resorts in many cases. Because keep in mind, the developer actually takes some of their unused inventory and will list it. And it's not always a good way because if the resort's sold out or it's booked by owners, they're not going to take that inventory and rent it. But generally speaking, and if you're looking out far enough in advance, or you're looking at off peak or shoulder season, you'll find some comp rates. And in that point, you want to say, okay, so if the resort's charging X, how am I going to get visibility against that? Obviously, there are things you can't compete with the resort on, like there's usually very, very flexible cancellation. People can book as many nights or as few nights as they want, whereas you may be booking or listing a full 7-night stay. So just, again, take that into account that secondary market's going to draw a lower uh, typically annual rate, or sorry, nightly rate. And you want to be very conscious of that. Be competitive, but realistic. So obviously we're never condoning giving your timeshare away, but it's usually not the case. Usually people are in the other direction, which is that,
Mhm.
they have these what are called, anchoring biases, which is essentially that they have a fixed cost in their head, whether it be a maintenance fee or what they paid for that unit. And because of that, they're like, oh, I can't rent this for anything less than my maintenance fees. Well, again, yes, you can, because if someone's willing to pay less, or if someone's offering it for less, or if the resorts themselves are actually renting for less than the maintenance fees, which I'm seeing more and more of, then, the traveler's not going to care what what your maintenance fees are. Just like if you were booking a hotel, you wouldn't care that their pool had to be repaired, and because of that, their costs have gone through the roof. And no, you're just going to look for the next hotel that's just as nice, and you're going to book that one that's 40% cheaper. So, just again, be mindful, think like the traveler, not necessarily like the owner when you're pricing. As an owner, of course, like we buy into these things. I own with Hilton Grand Vacations, and you want to make sure that you feel your value out of this product. But you got to balance that with knowing the market. Okay. Is there such a thing as too low? I always love this question.
Hmm.
The answer is yes and no. Um, you can be too low in that, one of the we're getting to a place now. We've been in the market for a while, and we have a brand name, and that's all great. But if people have not heard of us, or someone's not heard of us, they will still question things when there's a great deal on the platform.
Hmm.
Sometimes value can be interpreted as too good to be true. And so if people don't trust or aren't sure, that could be a red flag for someone. It also could signal a great deal and that people are really looking to rent this, and they'd rather have, some of their maintenance fees covered than none of their maintenance fees covered, and they want to make sure that they're going to get it booked. So again, use your best judgment, and you can always toggle pricing up and down with any listing, including ours. And just be aware and see where that market sits. But never start always way too high. You always want to start in the pocket, and then for whatever reason it's not renting, you can lower it from there.
Better to get it a booking than not get a booking when charging too much. Makes sense.
Always. Factor in fees. Yeah, fees are like, again, just knowing what you're going to take home, because you're going to have to pay, obviously your own maintenance fees, but there's also like resort fees. We account for this when you're listing, that you have to actually disclose any mandatory fees. Hawaii has tourist taxes, there's things like that. So just be cognizant of that, and make sure that the guest is aware of any of those fees. Make sure that anything that you have to cover out of the usage, these are things like guest certificate fees, these are things like reservation fees, all of that is pulled out of your net. So your net is going to be what you're taking home after all of that stuff is stripped out. And again, that could affect mentally where you're willing to rent that at. And again, where you're willing to, you have to be mindful of the market. Your willingness to rent too low may not, or may not necessarily coincide with what the traveler's willingness to pay for that is. So, um, again, taking all this into account.
Yeah, and that's again something to think about is a lot of people that come in and try and want to rent their timeshare have left it sitting there for 3 years now, and their maintenance fees $1,000 a year. They've thrown $3,000 down the drain. They still come in with that anchoring bias. So it's important to, hey, let's get a win this year. Let's again start at a price that makes sense. If we have to lower a little bit, let's recoup some of this cost, and then we can always learn every year as we do this. This isn't something that's gonna be perfect, right off the bat all the time, but learning each year is going to be crucial.
Ryan, I hear that every freaking day almost. Like someone is like, "Oh, that's not going to cover my maintenance fees. Thanks, but no thanks. We'll just use it." And guess what? We see him back a year later.
Right,
Hey,
right.
so
Right.
again, like if you're actually going to use it and you don't feel like rental is a viable option, because I mean, I've seen this a lot with the legacy resorts, like the maintenance fees are just like, but they're just getting out of hand, and like they're not even covering the cost of what this thing would, if you just went on and booking.com and booked it, it's going to be half the price of your maintenance fees. And that is unfortunate, but that is unfortunately the way things are. So
Right.
you just have to decide if you want something, if you want nothing and try to use it, if you want nothing and just let it go. Like, all of those things you have to take into account.
Then, do you want to talk about dynamic pricing tools?
Yeah, I mean, so dynamic pricing tools, I mean, we are about to release an AI pricing tool, and I think that is highly effective. Pricing tools are, interesting. It depends on how much inventory you have. I wouldn't necessarily recommend plugging in dynamic pricing tools that are generally plugins to, like, short-term rental software. They can certainly be useful. Less so if you have one piece of inventory, because it's going to take bookings and then adjust the rest of those bookings based off of demand.
Right.
But if you have multiple listings available, it can certainly help with that, right? Again, I always think that kind of setting this off on the right foot, and making sure you know and understand the market as best possible, and kind of working from there is your best option. But there's those tools out there available for you if you want.
And that brings us to tip number 4, which is patience. It's a virtue, and it stands true in timeshare. We talk a little bit about that.
It does, and I get it. I'm very impatient. I'm a New Yorker, but like,
Yeah, I know.
um, But at the same time, you have to be a little bit patient because, again, having this idea of knowing what you're going to rent or going to reserve and put on a platform very far in advance. Sometimes the best inventory actually rents very last minute because if it's very high demand, all of the other stuff goes in the market first, and then where can I find this? I really want to go to this place, and they end up finding the secondary market as like a solution to the problem that the platforms they're used to booking on, whether it be Booking.com, Expedia, Airbnb, whatever, those are no longer available for the type of stay they want, and they lo and behold they find something on the secondary market, whether it's KOALA or some of the other platforms that are out there, and they're very willing to book it very last minute. We see a lot of stuff that books within 60 days. So much so that we actually created a whole section of the platform called Last Resort, and that
Mm.
it really concentrates all the listings that are available within a 90-day check-in. So again, if you're getting the best stuff and you want the best results, you may be sitting on that for months. Okay. Also, patience in terms of just understanding how to rent. Like it's okay to take a lower rate on the first year. I always recommend having the full service option available to you. You may not be totally happy with the payouts based on what you paid for the product or continuing to pay for the product, but I promise you, having a return on that investment is much better than having nothing financially, I should say, because I obviously we're using it as a different type of return on that investment, so to speak. But in terms of any sort of financial return, getting something if you're not using it is much, much better than getting nothing. And so from that point, you can start to understand and learn what is the real market versus what expectations are. And that's where the good stuff starts to happen.
And in terms of speaking with people, trying to book and being a host, any quick tips there? Like obviously being responsive and courteous are kind of obvious in some ways. If this is hospitality, we're going to host someone in our timeshares. Anything else that people need to consider?
Yeah, I mean, look, being responsive and courteous, we just launched peer-to-peer messaging, which allows you to chat with the potential guest as they're looking to potentially book. They may have simple questions like, "Is there a coffee machine in the resort?" And like you're like, "Well, it's a resort, of course there is," but they don't know that necessarily. So we get it, trust me. So just again, being able to communicate directly with that, and of course, if you're listing on other platforms, you are the person that's going to be communicating with said buyer or renter, right? And so you just want to be very clear and concise. And yeah, look, you're not the only one out there. I mean, obviously, timeshare rentals. We've really worked very hard to mainstream this to make it really appealing to the general traveler. Not all platforms really do that in a way that is very clear that this is a timeshare rental. And so, I think we're unique in that capacity. But like again, you always want to be very courteous, professional, and really respond to these inquiries as quickly as possible.
Any final notes on, you kind of mentioned this a little bit already, learning, evolving, taking it one step at a time, year after year, trying to get better. Is there any other kind of final tips around this or just general that you have for timeshare owners?
Yeah, I mean, again, it really comes down to knowing what you're going to be listing and understanding how to price that listing. It's not rocket science, but it's also not easy, right? It's simple, it's not easy, and there's a reason that there's been a massive industry of like middlemen or brokers that are really dealing and managing a lot of this inventory for the owners because they do understand the market and they understand how to move large swaths of this inventory. But you can learn also if that's what you want. Some people are like, look, I already have a job. I don't need a second job. I don't need my timeshare rentals to be that. And again, we have KOALA Concierge. It's a full service, rental program and very hands off. And, we guarantee bookings and we can do that because we move such mass. But some people really want to dip their toe in the pool. And I think for them, it's really about, if you've never done this, is start small, keep your expectations realistic. If you're coming out of a sales presentation where you've just bought something with the idea of rental, always cross check that because I can tell you 9 times out of 10, those expectations are way bloated. And so bringing that down to reality is something that generally needs to happen. So just again, that process of starting small and moving up, or starting with something more full service and kind of going into the DIY over time, I think both of those things can really yield amazing results. And yeah, I think if you kind of follow these tips and you keep your expectations reasonable, then you can be a very successful timeshare renter. And yeah, good luck.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike. Really appreciate it. I think those are some really good tips. And guys watching this video, there is a link in the description. If you want to try listing your timeshare for free, you can check out Koala. You can check out our reviews. We have over 600 or maybe even 700 now reviews on Trustpilot. We have, I think, 4.7 on there. So lots of people using the platform and trying it out. You can try it out as well today. And if you're interested in our membership tiers as well, you can speak with somebody, speak with one of our friendly experts who's just going to give you kind of no pressure advice on how we can help you list your timeshare. Mike, do you want to elaborate on any of these options that Qual provides here?
Yeah, first and foremost, it's free to list and always will be free to list. We always offer that free listing service. Again, that's for people that have a little more experience or want to take the time to understand the market. So that's create a free listing. The VIP
Hmm.
memberships are not listing fees. The VIP memberships offer new products. They unlock something called the hub, which is a ledger of booking requests that you can fulfill with your points. We look at the Platinum VIP tier. This is the Koala Concierge. You have a separate call line that you can call. There's a lot of different things that we start to open up that, depending again on your level of expertise or what you're looking to get for your timeshares, can be really, really useful. We have people that make tens of thousands of dollars off the hub each year, and they're doing really nothing. They're not doing any work. It takes all the guesswork out. So, Koala Pro, this is for some of those people that are timeshare rental companies that manage a lot of inventory for owners. And so this gives them some very bespoke software that's specialized and built specifically for timeshare that helps them navigate some of that space that's not typically really built for timeshare rentals, is built for home rentals. And we kind of fill in those gaps. That includes things like a channel manager, partnership integrations with different channels that you can distribute inventory to, that gives you access to 300 million unique monthly visitors. It's a lot of really great tools in there that are specifically for people that have a larger amount of inventory.
This is something we're trying to do at Koala is take a pretty archaic industry and make this a lot easier for timeshare owners and also vacationers as well to make those connections easier. So we would love if you visited the website, obviously check it out, give us any feedback that you have, chat with us. Again, try out a free listing. We're very open to feedback, obviously, as we're growing this platform, and we're excited to hear from you. So yeah, Mike, thanks for joining me on the Weekly Exchange, the now named Weekly Exchange. We're very excited, and yeah, we'll see you next week. We'll have Mike on again soon. We'll have a bunch of other guests coming on that are timeshare experts in the field. So, Mike, do you have any final thoughts for the fans out there?
Nope. See you next week.
Right
Thanks for
on.
joining.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody. See you guys.